Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. I am so glad that you're here and welcome back to Bookmas. Today I'm going to be doing a winter book recs video for you guys, and I'm also going to be sharing my winter TBR more towards the end of the video. Looking at all the books I have in front of me, I have so many good books to talk about, so many books that I'm personally excited to get into, but also just so many good ones to recommend to you guys. So we're just going to get right on into it, starting with my recommendations. First up, we have two Christmassy holiday reads. We have Holiday Romance and Snowed In, both by Catherine Walsh. These are interconnected standalone romances, and they're both set around the holiday time. The first one I read last holiday season, and it's following Molly and Andrew, and basically they both fly home from Chicago to Ireland every single Christmas, and Molly's family isn't really big on Christmas, but Andrew's family is a huge Christmas family. They are going all out, Christmas sweaters, everything's decorated, big Christmas dinner, all of that kind of stuff. And Molly's family aren't Grinches or anything like that. They just do a little bit less for the holiday, and it's more about being present and being with family and just kind of having that family time for them. And they've been flying on the same flight together for literally years, so they're really good friends, and something ends up happening where they get stuck in the airport for a while and end up taking all of these random flights. It's honestly really cute and really good. And then the second one is actually following Andrew's brother, Christian. I actually just read this recently. I think I literally finished it yesterday. So we're following him, and then we're following Megan, which is our female main character. These are both dual POV, by the way. I love a romance book that's dual POV. I feel like every time a romance book doesn't have it, I always wish it did. But they're both from the same small town in Ireland, and they both have ended up working in Dublin. They run into each other, and there ends up being a little bit of a reason or two why they both don't want to go home this year, so they end up choosing to fake date and just kind of be there for each other on the holidays. I really enjoyed both of these. I thought that they were really great, not just atmospheric holiday time reads, but I feel like all of these characters had personalities outside of the holidays. They had things going on. I feel like I could actually read this book without it being the holiday season and probably enjoy it just as much. Got me realizing there's a shadow right here from my mic. That's kind of weird. Okay. Anyway, I definitely recommend these for the holiday season. They are the perfect holiday romances. Next up, we have this lovely series right here. I literally have a whole shelf on my bookshelves dedicated to it, if you can't tell already that I love it. And that is the Throne of Glass series by Miss Sarah J. Maas. I think I finished this series in June or July of this year, and I started in December of last year. It is one of the best fantasy series I have ever read. It is so good. The characters just mean so much to me, and I feel like there's so many great stories and themes of things that are going on. And obviously it's a long series, so things change a lot along the way, but we're basically following an assassin named Selena Sardothian at the beginning, and she's brought to the kingdom to be a part of the king's trials in order to be the king's champion, aka the king's assassin. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to spoil anything for you because there's so many spoilers out there, and honestly I got a lot spoiled for me, and I feel like it would have been an even greater experience, which I can't even imagine because I literally loved everything about these books. But it would have been even better if I would have stayed off of TikTok and scrolled past the spoilers if I had self-restraint. A lot of people have different recommendations of how to read this series. I personally read the prequel first. It just makes the most sense to my brain. Some people read it third. I recommend it first. I feel like you just get very easily connected to her, and it's a great way to start off the story and really get to know who our main character Selena is. Now, I feel like these are perfect for the winter, honestly, just because when you're reading any fantasy book, you are just totally immersed in the world that you are in, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I feel like winter can sometimes be just a dreary time. Honestly, it always is, let's be honest. I feel like the holidays are great and all, but once you get to January, February, early March, you're just kind of down in the dumps. And I feel like reading is my favorite way to kind of keep my mental health in check. And I feel like diving into this series last year really helped me mentally and just made me so invested in the story. And I just absolutely fell in love with the characters, the world. I love these books so much. I cannot talk about them enough, honestly. So I'm gonna stop there. We are gonna go ahead and go into Sarah J. Maas's next series though, which is Agatar. Now this series has been hyped for a while. I will talk about it though, because if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend. There's still more books in the series coming out. So I feel like now would be a really great time to start. Right now, as you can see, there are 5 books out, and we're basically following our main character, Feyre. She's kind of had a tough go of it. Her and her family are not doing very well, and even though she is the youngest sibling, she is sent out to hunt to basically feed her family. Her 2 older sisters aren't really doing anything. Her father isn't really doing anything, and the Fae in this world are kind of bad guys, but they're also really powerful, and there's kind of a line. So there's the human realm on this side, the Fae realm on this side, and we're not supposed to cross the realms, which you can probably see where that is going, somebody's gonna cross the realm, and that's basically all I will say. I feel like this world is so magical and so beautiful, and it really made me fall in love with fantasy. My favorite is the third one, A Court of Wings and Ruin. It is so good. This series is very political, but it's also very romantic heavy, and I feel like, again, just like Throne of Glass, being able to dive into a different world during the winter time is truly just such a beautiful thing, and one of the biggest reasons why I love to read. Since we're talking about big fantasy series, I'm just gonna drop this one here. I'm gonna say it now, because if you haven't read this series yet, I could not recommend it enough. And that is this guy right here, Harry Potter. This first one is the Sorcerer's Stone. I have all 7 up there on my bookshelves. I finished them, I think about like 2 or 3 years ago now. I reread the first one last year around the holidays. These books are obviously very perfect in the fall, but they're also very perfect in the winter. I feel like we all basically know what this is about by now, but we're basically following Harry Potter and his wizarding journey. He's at this school called Hogwarts, where he learns to become a wizard, and along the way, he learns a lot of things about his past and why things happen the way they did. This series is so beautiful. This is a YA series, but I will say once we get more towards the end, I think it becomes a little bit more adult because you are growing up with the characters. Each book kind of follows a different year of them growing up as the school. So you go with them from the age of 11, I believe, to the age of 17 or 18. These books are just so magical, and I love watching the movies during this time of year too. So if you haven't read it yet, I think it's time. Next up, we have Love at First Book by Jen McKinley. I feel like not a lot of people are talking about this, but I thought it was really cute. It's basically about this girl who gets the opportunity to move to Ireland and be the assistant to her favorite author and help her write her last novel. She's been a fan of this series for years, reread the books time and time again, and also while she's there, she's going to be working at the bookshop that the author's son owns. I think you can see where this is going. This book is set during the wintertime too, so it just gives like the cutest, coziest vibes. I feel like being in Ireland just sets the cutest and coziest vibes itself, honestly, without it being winter. I feel like our main character too is just kind of like living the dream. Like, who wouldn't want to go, one, hang out with their favorite author, but also be able to have the opportunity to write and like brainstorm with them. I thought that that was such a cool addition to the story. But the ending was also kind of a little bit sad, but I feel like it kind of had like a very good theme behind it. And honestly, oh my gosh, I'm actually like tearing up a little bit thinking about the book. But this is such a beautiful book. I feel like it's the perfect romance book to read during the winter time. Next up, we're going to be talking about Heartstopper. This is actually a graphic novel series. I have the other 5 over there. Number 1, graphic novels are so quick and easy to fly through. You could literally read maybe like 2 or 3 of these in one day if you really wanted to. So I feel like they're the perfect palate cleanser. These books specifically though, Nick and Charlie, who are the 2 main characters, I just instantly fell in love with them and their story. So Nick and Charlie both go to this all-boys school, and Charlie Spring is openly gay. He got bullied for it a lot last year, and he kind of finds a friend in Nick, and Nick becomes a very safe place for him, and then along the way, things kind of happen, and they fall in love, and it's just such a beautiful story. I feel like the representation in these books is so beautiful too, with the friend group and all the people that they surround themselves with, and I feel like this series talks about a lot of really important topics for people of this age that they are going through, and I feel like the representation just in general, a lot of things that people of this age are going through, I feel like it's really important to be talked about, and I feel like a lot of the times authors stray away from those things, and I feel like it's just represented in such a great way in these graphic novels. Plus, the art is just so incredibly beautiful. Alice Osman did such a beautiful job with these, and I just recently started watching the show too, and I just have fallen in love with them even more. If you want to feel that feeling of falling in love for the first time, these are definitely the books for you. Highly recommend. If you're scared of trying a graphic novel, literally don't be. I feel like everybody would love these. Next up, we have the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Miss Stephanie Garber. I have the other 2 right down here. They're kind of hidden by my plant, but this series is so cute. It's a fairy tale fantasy series, and in this we are following our main character, Evangeline Fox. She's very naive, but she's a hopeless romantic, and you can't just help but kind of like root for her in a way, even though sometimes she does make silly decisions. Her and this boy in her town are absolutely in love, and then the next day she wakes up and he's marrying another girl all of a sudden, which she was just like so flabbergasted she didn't know what to do with that. So she ends up going to the Prince of Hearts church, and the Prince of Hearts is a fate in this world. He's kind of like a god in a way. They have like different powers, and they kind of have like a whole lore to them, which you learn about more in the book once you get to it. His name is Jax, and she ends up making a deal with Jax, and then the rest is kind of history. One thing about Stephanie Garber that I will say, you will never know where she's gonna go with it. Anything with the story, anything with the characters, any plot line, I don't think you could guess. I feel like a lot of books sometimes can be pretty predictable, especially the more you read. Like, you'll be like, oh, like this fits like the same like fantasy book mold. This book and this series absolutely doesn't, and I've started Caraval by her too. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit, but I just can't say enough good things about this series. It's a 5-star series for me. It's so good. I feel like if you're wanting something that has like a very whimsical element to it too, this is the perfect trilogy for you. They're YA too, so you're just going to like fly through these. They're so magical. I love them so much. Next up, we have definitely one of my favorite books that I read this year, which is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book is a romance book that has magical realism in it, like all of her other books do, and we are following our main character, Clementine West, and she's kind of going through a rough time right now. Her aunt, who she was very, very close to, recently passed away, and her aunt ended up gifting her her apartment. So she moves in, everything's fine and dandy, and then one day she walks in, and all of a sudden she's 7 years in the past. And there's this guy living there, she knows absolutely nothing about him, and then the next day he's gone, she's back in the apartment in the present day. And we kind of just go from there. It's a lot about like self-discovery, and honestly has a lot of like women's fiction elements, even though the romance is a huge plot of the story. I feel like we do talk a lot about Clementine's journey just as a person and like growing up and trying to find herself in general, but the romance in this book is so beautiful. I feel like this was one of the best stories of like right person, wrong time, honestly. Like I don't know if I will ever read a story that matches up to this with that trope. It is so beautiful. I will forever recommend this. I feel like it's in New York too, so it just kind of gives like nice like fall winter cozy vibes. Next up is The Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. This is dual POV. We're following our two main characters, Rune and Gideon, and it's kind of set more like back in the day, like in a Bridgerton era. Like they still have like balls and fancy parties and like mansions and all that kind of going on. And by day, our main character Rune is a rich, lavish socialite. She doesn't really seem like she's got a lot going on up here, you know? But then by night, she is the Crimson Moth. She's a witch vigilante going out and saving other witches, because in this world, just being a witch is a crime, so they're trying to exile all the witches from their community. Our other main character, Gideon Sharp, is literally like one of the heads of the witch hunter community. He is a part of the Blood Guard, and for one reason or another, these two cross paths, and they both decide to get to know each other a little bit more, each for their own benefits, and that's all I'm really gonna say. This book was so good, so fast-paced. If you're looking for anything witchy, I feel like you would absolutely eat this up. The romance in here too is very prevalent, very much romantic-y heavy, and I believe this is just going to be a duology. The second one is coming out in February, and I am really excited. Next up, we have Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This was actually her YA debut. I believe it came out this time last year, and I think this is actually my favorite book by Ali Hazelwood. This one was so cute. We're basically following our main character, Mallory Greenleaf. We only get her perspective, and she's kind of taken on a lot of responsibilities very young. Her mom is sick, her dad's not in the picture, and she has a younger sibling, and she's 18 years old. She really had to grow up super fast. All her friends are going away to college, doing all these things, and growing up, Mallory was super big into chess. She was like one of the best players ever, but she had to give that up to take care of her family and kind of step up in that way. So now all of a sudden, she gets a chance to start playing chess again, and she ends up playing against the current world champion, Nolan Sawyer, randomly, and then all of a sudden, things just kind of go from there. I feel like this book was a beautiful depiction of growing up, all the different feelings there, kind of like whenever you're at different stages of your life after high school, because I feel like so many people go down different routes after high school, and I feel like that's talked about a lot, and we really get to know Mallory, and I thought that her story was just so beautiful. The little bit of romance we get in here too was super cute, and I just really enjoyed this one. I feel like it's the perfect romance for the winter time. This series is a very big series, but I wanted to talk about it because I feel like if you haven't read it yet, you definitely should, and that is the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. Listen, I get scared of literally everything, and I enjoyed these so much. I read all 3 of these earlier this year, and they actually just came out with the show, and basically you're going to be following our main character Pip, and she's a senior in high school, and each senior has to do like a big senior project, and she decides to take a case that was really never solved that happened in her town and look into it again, and then things just kind of go from there, from this book to the other 2. And let me just say, one of my favorite things about this book is that it was so fast-paced, and Holly Jackson's writing is so interesting because she adds in so many cool different elements. She adds in like random little calendar bits, she adds in like photos of evidence, she adds in different entries for Pip's school project. She also does like interviews and stuff, which is so cool. I don't know, I just feel like this entire series was just so creative, and I also think that it's the perfect time to dive into it because I feel like you could just really get immersed in it. I feel like you could fly through these 3 too because they're YA. So if you haven't read these yet, highly recommend, or even do a reread too. I really want to watch the show because I've heard really great things. I think there's only 1 season out right now, and I feel like like the show will give off the same vibe, but being able to like try and figure out the cases as Pip was, like, I don't know what it was, but I literally felt my adrenaline pumping. I was just so invested and so into it. Now, this one is by a very popular author, but for some reason, I feel like this one isn't talked about very much, especially anymore, but I feel like it needs to be, and that is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've literally been thinking about rereading this. I read this for the first time, I think more at the start of my reading journey, and it is such a beautiful story. And this, we're following Emma Blair, and she meets this guy Jesse in high school. They fall in love, they get married, and they're both like very adventurous. They think that they have their whole life like planned out ahead of them. And then all of a sudden, her husband Jesse goes missing. She ends up moving back home. She's obviously having a very tough time because her husband is gone and she has no idea where he is. And she ends up rekindling this little friendship that she had with this guy named Sam that she met during high school. One thing leads to another. Sam and Emma are engaged a few years later, and all of a sudden Jesse comes back, and you're just kind of following the story from there. This book did involve a little bit of the tropes that I don't enjoy, but it was done in such a great way because of the circumstances that like Emma was dealing with. I gave this to my mom to read too, and she said that she was literally crying so much throughout it. It's such a beautiful story, and it's so tragic and so sad, and it's just so interesting too, because you're like, oh my gosh, like who's she gonna pick? Is she gonna pick her old life or her new life? Like what's she gonna do? Like obviously that's like her husband. Highly recommend. If you have not read this, please don't skip it because it's a beautiful story, okay? And I feel like if you're gonna cry anytime if you're reading a book, I would rather cry during the winter than any other time because I just want to feel something, you know? And that definitely made me bawl my eyes out, so. Okay, not me kicking my tripod, my bad guys. Next up we have Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is held in the Regency era, and it's kind of like a fairy tale fantasy. In a way, we are basically following our main character Dora, and whenever she's younger, she gets half of her soul taken away by a fae. And now that her and her cousin are older, they are looking for partners in England, so they end up going to London in high society to find her cousin a partner, and along the way, you're kind of like, yeah, Dora does act a lot different than other people do because she is literally missing half of her soul. The Regency era of it all, I absolutely fell in love with. I think I read this around the time that Bridgerton season 3 came out, and I feel like it was the perfect time to read it. I will say one thing that was a little bit hard for me with this book was definitely like the Regency London era like speak, I guess, like the language that they use, just because it's different than the language we use today. But if you can get past that, I feel like you would really enjoy it. It's really cute. It kind of has like a little bit of a mystery element to it too, and I feel like it's a lot different than all the other fantasy books that I've read. And yeah, it's under 300 pages too, so that's a win. I feel like this is an OG book talk book, but Normal People by Sally Rooney. I recently read this for the first time this year, and I feel like there's a lot of different opinions on this book. Some people love it, some people hate it. I really enjoyed it. It's not like my favorite book ever, but I feel like it really depicts the reality of love in the current state of time that we're in. Like things do get messy, but it's also just really real and realistic, and I do want to read more of her work. But this is set in Ireland. We're following our two main characters, Marianne and Connell, and we kind of like grow up with them. We get to know them more in like high school, and then they go to like college, and then they grow up a little bit more, and it kind of gives like right person, wrong time or unrequited love. They like change a lot throughout this book. There's also times where just like one's in love and the other's not, and like there's so many different ways that this book goes, but I feel like it's just very realistic and kind of just like a sadder story. It's definitely not a romance. It's more of like a literary fiction, but if you're wanting something that is like very like coming of age and very realistic and real, I feel like you should definitely read this. Now going from that, we have something a little bit more cutesy, a little bit more fun. We have Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This came out around this time last year. This is a cute and fun YA rom-commy romance. We are following our two main characters, Bailey and Charlie, and it's dual POV. I picked this one because it is set in the winter, and they literally go on like a little vacation with her family where I'm pretty sure it's at like a ski lodge and like a cozy little like resort like winter area. I feel like it was very like atmospheric and very cutesy. Now there are a lot of things that you can probably relate to if you are younger or if you are older and went through these things whenever you were younger. It does talk a lot about like divorce and their experiences going through that, and they do relate to each other a lot on that. I will say the two main characters didn't really love each other a lot at first, and it is a little bit of enemies to lovers. They also don't go to school together. This is a like coworkers romance. Whenever you're younger, they both work at the local movie theater, which I thought was really cute. I feel like I'm gonna eat up like a coworkers romance every single time. I literally married my past coworker, so I feel like that makes sense for me. And there's also a little bit of fake dating in here, and I don't know, it's just very cute and a really good YA read. This next one is a literary fiction. It is the story Life of AJ Fickery by Gabrielle Zevin. In this book, you're following a grumpy bookstore owner where he's just like really unhappy. He's kind of been dealt a few hard cards in his life, and he's just depressed. He has no path for his life. He doesn't really like to do anything anymore, and he's just like unhappy. And then he wakes up one day, finds something on his doorstep, and everything kind of changes for him. He finds like a different purpose to his life. This book is such a beautiful book about change and how people can evolve and honestly just become happier, and how important it is to also like have like a community behind you. The writing of this was so fast-paced for me. I think I literally read this in almost one sitting at the pool this past summer, but it just gives like the coziest vibes. And the ending to this book was so incredibly sad. I didn't even realize how connected I was to the characters until it was like too late and I got to the end and I was like sobbing. And this is also under 300 pages, so if you're looking for a quicker read during the winter, I think you would really enjoy this. And again, it's a sadder read, so perfect for the winter time because I like being sad during the winter apparently. Next up, we have another romance, which is The Heartbreak House Share by Emily Merrill. We are following our main character, Flick, and she's in her young 20s, and she kind of had her whole life planned out for her. She was living with her boyfriend. She thought that they were going to get engaged and then married, and then all of a sudden that relationship ends and she has to start completely over. She's starting a brand new life. She just finished college. She's starting a new job, and she has to move in with some roommates into a house share. Now, in a house share, it's just completely random roommates, but she ends up learning so much about herself along the way. She also ends up creating a like 20s bucket list of all the things that she wants to do before she turns like 30, I guess. And this is really about her going through that bucket list, finding herself, finding her purpose, who she really is, and along the way, there is a little bit of a romance, which I really did enjoy. This book was cute and fun, but it also talked about a lot of like real life things. And I feel like if you're in your 20s or if you've been through your 20s, you would definitely relate to this book a lot. Next up, I'm going to be recommending some series, but I've only read the first book, so I kind of wanted to let you guys know that I had only read the first book so we could kind of like read the series together. We're going to start out with Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is a YA sci-fi series. We're basically following our main character Spensa, and she's living in this world where they have been under attack and at war since the day she was born, like before then even. So she really hasn't known anything else in her life, and the pilots in this world are like the heroes. And she's always wanted to become a pilot, but for one reason or another, her family's reputation isn't the best, so she kind of has a hard time getting into pilot school. Once she does though, she realized how high the stakes actually are in pilot school and how serious this all is. This book was so good. The found family in it, honestly going to pilot school with them all and having that like school aspect of a sci-fi fantasy book is always a fun plot line. Like I always eat it up. And there's so many just like interesting elements to this book. His writing is so well done. It's so bingeable. It just flies by, and I cannot recommend this enough. I'm actually going to start the second one, I think in December, and I'm really excited to continue the series. Another series that I started like a month or two ago was The Kindred's Curse Saga by Penn Cole. I read the first one, which is Spark of the Everflame. And this one we're following our main character DM, and she's a healer, and she's living in this world where there are mortals and then there are the Descended. The Descended are basically descendants of gods who came down to the world who had children with mortals and created a whole new race. There's a bunch of different realms and stuff like that, which as you get into the book and as you read on becomes a little bit less confusing. I feel like whenever there's a lot going on in a world, you kind of have to read a book or two to kind of figure things out. So I'm still trying to figure that out myself, honestly. The writing style is pretty easy to read in my opinion, so it was kind of like easy to flow through. It does start off a little bit slow like a lot of fantasies do, but once you get into it, it really does pick up. And there's a palace, there are a lot of things going on over there that DM's involved in, but then there's also like a rebellion going on that she kind of gets swayed away into, and she's kind of trying to figure out who's right and who's in the wrong and what side she wants to be on and what she truly believes in as a person. The ending of this book was like, I was absolutely stunned. I still am stunned. I want to start the second one in the series so bad, and I'm sure a ton of you guys have at least read the first one or the rest of the series because a lot of you guys ended up recommending this to me, and that's why I read it. But if you haven't, you should definitely get into the series and we could all read it together. Next up, we have the Vancouver Storm series. The first one is Behind the Net, and I've already read that one. I enjoyed it. They're very spicy, at least the first one was, I will say, so just know that going in, like extra spicy. So if that's your vibe, I feel like you'd really like it. And I like the plot of it a lot. I feel like I'm just more of like a tension over spice girly. You guys know me. I feel like I need a little bit more plot to enjoy the spice if there's gonna be quite a bit of it. These are by Stephanie Archer. I've heard the second one in the series though is really good. It's called The Fake Out, and then one just recently came out, the third one, it's called The Wingman. These are all just hockey romances. I really want to read the second one though because it's about the sister of the girl in the first one. I don't remember her name, but she like had this goal of like doing something that I thought was cool. I can't remember what it is, but I really enjoyed the first one. You're basically following these two characters. The guy is a professional hockey player and he hires the girl to be like a nanny basically for his new dog, but also to kind of be like his assistant. She just does stuff around the house and stuff. One thing leads to another, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't know. I really want to read the second one, maybe the third one, depending on how I feel about the second one. And this little interconnected standalone series is all on Kindle Unlimited, by the way. Next up, we have The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This first one is on Kindle Unlimited. I enjoyed this first one so much. You're basically following our main character, Kiva, and she is in like a prison and she's a healer, shockingly enough. She's around 17 years old. You're basically following her journey in the prison. It's a little bit more character-based, and I feel like a lot of times I say I don't really enjoy character-based books, but when I enjoy the characters and I feel connected to them, I enjoy it so much. And the plot of it is on the back, and I feel like I don't even want to say what the plot is, but that's kind of like what keeps the story going a little bit. Since I did say it was like more character-based, I do recommend just going into this blind and not knowing anything about it, because I feel like it'd be a lot more shocking and a lot more interesting if you did. But it kind of goes from like following the characters and like learning about their found family, which just like was so cute and I just connected to them so much, to like the big plot point, and then like back and forth, and then the ending was just absolutely insane. I am so excited to read the second one. I read this with my book club with my friends Jordy and Abby, and we're gonna be starting the second one soon. I am so excited to continue this series. Like, it could be a 5-star series for me. I enjoyed it that much, so highly recommend going in blind specifically. Next up, we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is duology. I read the first one earlier this year, and this is more of like a gothic fantasy. It's a very interesting story. We're basically following our main character Elspeth, and she kind of has like a monster in her mind in a way. There's like this illness that's spread throughout the kingdom, and anybody who has the illness, they're exiled. And then there's also like this mist that you can get caught in, and then there's also like these cards, which are kind of like tarot cards, but if you tap them, they like give you powers, and everybody is trying to like collect the cards, because if you collect the cards, you can like do something cool. The magic system is so unique. Like, I can even begin to like fully explain anything I just tried to explain to you, but I feel like once you like really get into the story, it does make a lot of sense. And following Elspeth's character too is so interesting. I'm really excited to read the second one in the duology, because the ending was very interesting. I just don't really know where they're gonna go with it from here, but I feel like I'm really going to enjoy this. When I say gothic too, it's not like scary, because you guys know I cannot do scary. It's just a little bit like darker and like eerier, and I really enjoyed those vibes. Last up for this category, we have Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I recently read the first one. I actually read it in my Christmas Songs Choose reading vlog, which was up a few days ago on the first day of Bookmas, so go check that out if you guys are interested. And this is the first book in the trilogy that comes before the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy that I just talked about earlier by Stephanie Garber. I didn't read this trilogy obviously before I read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I don't think you need to. I think I'll have more of an opinion on it after I finish this trilogy though, so we'll have to see in general how I feel about it after I finish the series. But in this one, we are following two sisters. We're following Scarlett and Donatella, but we're mainly just following Scarlett's journey. And her and her sister have always wanted to go to Caraval, which is kind of like a game, and it's like very exclusive. It's like a mystery thing. It's very magical. There's a lot of twists and turns and just a lot of things going on, and they end up getting a ticket to go. They end up going, and that's kind of like the journey and the plot of this whole entire book. There's a lot of different twists and turns. It was honestly like a little bit confusing, so I'm kind of like looking for answers in the second one. And I feel like Scarlett and Donatella's vibe as sisters is very common, like younger sister, older sister. Scarlett's really trying to look out for Donatella, especially because they kind of have like a rough, traumatic home life situation going on, and Donatella just kind of like does things and risks her life and just things in general without thinking of the consequences and like what could happen afterwards, or just like in general. But overall, I thought this was fun, very magical, and I'm really excited to finish the rest of the trilogy. Now we're gonna go ahead and get into my winter TBR, starting off with reading the rest of like the Heartstopper universe. Obviously, we have the main 5 graphic novels right here. Please tell me too, Alice Osman, wherever you are out there, that the 6th Heartstopper graphic novel is coming out this next year in 2025. I need it like I need to breathe. Like, just like genuinely, like I love these characters so much. I just need the rest of the story. Please, Alice, this is my public service announcement to you. Please release Heartstopper 6 next year. Please and thank you. But right here, I have one of the novellas. It's called This Winter. And this isn't just a graphic novel. There's also like genuine storytelling in here too, with like pages with just words on them, but there are like pictures as well. For example, we got this kind of vibe going on. They aren't in color like the graphic novels are. I'm pretty sure I might be reading this in a Bookmas video, because I feel like this would be a perfect holiday read, because it's literally like about the holidays. But there's so many more books in the Heartstopper universe. There's Solitaire, and there's another Heartstopper novella. I'll go ahead and put all of them up here because I don't remember what they're called, but I do want to eventually read them just because I loved Heartstopper so much, and I want to get into other character stories and kind of like what's going on with them as well. Next up, we got a big one that I will probably, hopefully, definitely be reading in the month of December, and that is Crescent City 1, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is the last series in the Massiverse by Sarah J. Maas that I have to read, and I feel like I'm about to really get into my fantasy era, so it's the perfect time to pick this one up. I've heard that this is a fantasy, but it's also got like a little bit of mystery elements into it too, and I just want to be caught up. I want to read the last 3 books that I need to read by her, so I can do that and be ready for whenever she releases her next book, which who knows whenever that will be, but I will be waiting and counting down the hours, days, and minutes until that moment. And I really don't know anything else about it. It's a big one, obviously, so we'll see how this goes. After that, we have Beartown by Frederick Mackman, another one that I really just want to read this December. Might be in a bookmas video, who really knows? This is basically set in a town where they're very good at hockey. Like, hockey is kind of like just a part of like the town's identity in itself, but it also talks a lot about like very like deep and real life things going on. This is a literary fiction, so I feel like it's just a very like real story. I believe we're following people more on like high school age, and I've heard that you get like a bunch of different point of views as well. I've heard nothing but great things about Frederick Bachman's writing, and I've been wanting to get more into literary fiction as well, and I've loved almost every single literary fiction that I've ever read. So I feel like I'm really gonna enjoy this, and I feel like it's just a perfect winter read because like hockey just gives winter, and I've heard it's really sad. So I'm interested to see if I cry. Hopefully I'll eventually get to the other books in the series as well. I think there's 3, but I'm not entirely sure. Now we have 2 books that are actually on Kindle Unlimited currently that I've just heard a lot of things about recently. Number 1, we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I've heard this is more of like a adult fantasy version of Caraval. I think you're following 2 sisters and you're going into like a different realm of the world, and it's kind of like magical and mystical, but it's like gothic Caraval. So I feel like that sounds very interesting. Heard amazing things about it, so I really want to get into that. And the second one is Metal Slinger by Rachel Schneider. I've heard a lot of things about this one as well. Honestly, don't really know anything about it. I think it's more like enemies to lovers kind of romance, and there's like a rebellion and stuff like that. I don't really know almost anything about it. I've just heard great things from a lot of the people that I watch on booktube. And like Phantasma, I believe the second one is coming out early next year, so I really want to read both of these before both of the second ones in the series end up coming out. Also, sorry if the lighting has changed a lot in this video. It's like so dark and gloomy out right now, and I'm having to use my overhead lights, so hopefully the lighting and everything is fine. Then we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I feel like this has been on so many TBRs. This is by B.E. Schwab, and I've always wanted to read a book by her. I've heard a lot of great things about her Vicious series as well. I'm specifically reading this because my friend Abby read this past summer, and she absolutely loved it. She really enjoyed it, and I think it's about this girl named Addie LaRue who like makes a deal with like a higher power, and then all of a sudden she like can live for a super long time, but she's like invisible to other people. I've heard the writing is very lyrical, very beautiful. I'm a little scared though because it's a little bit slow, but that's like the nature and like the part about like what makes this book beautiful as well. So I don't really know how I'm gonna feel about this, but I definitely want to pick it up this winter. We have another author that I've just been really wanting to read one of her books for so long, and the 2 books that I really want to get through by her this winter are The Nightingale and The Great Alone. These are both by Kristen Hanna. Now, The Nightingale, I'm pretty sure, is set during World War II. I don't really know exactly what's going on there or anything about the storyline, but I know these are both historical fictions, and I don't know too much about exactly what's going on in The Great Alone either, but it is set in Alaska in 1974. A lot of you guys recommended me to read this during the winter time, and I'm assuming it's because it's set in Alaska, and I feel like I would absolutely love historical fiction just like as a genre, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about Kristen Hanna's writing. I literally want to pick up one of her books right now. I think the reason why I put it off so much is just because of the sheer size of them, because I feel like they are a little bit longer than like the average book that I read, but I've also read like these big guys back here, so I shouldn't be afraid of like a 500-page book, and yet here we are. I still haven't read it. I also have Firefly Lane by her on my TBR as well. If you guys have a Kristen Hanna favorite, please leave it in the comments down below. I would love to know which other ones you guys highly recommend as well. I hopefully, maybe someday, will end up reading all of her books because I've heard amazing things about almost all of them. But if you guys could pick one book for me to read first, what one would you pick? Leave it down below. After that, we have Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I've literally just heard that this is about a cozy magical bookshop. What sounds more winter and fun than that? This is also a fantasy standalone, which I feel like is kind of rare to find. It's a YA fantasy. I feel like I'm just gonna enjoy it. Who doesn't love a YA fantasy? I know I do, personally. I feel like I've talked a lot about them, not just recommended them, but also like had a lot on my TBR. And I just love fantasy so much. I feel like this is gonna be really nice during the winter time, especially because during the winter I'm just in like the biggest fantasy mood. Speaking of another fantasy book that I really want to read, we have Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. Again, my friend Abby really loved this book. She read it whenever it was indie published, actually, I think like a year or 2 ago, and she really loved it, fell in love with it. I'm pretty sure there's dragons in it too, so it's like a dragon fantasy, and it just got traditionally published, so I would really like to read it. I don't really know anything about it other than that. As you will know if you've watched my channel for a while, I love to go into books very blindly because I like to be kind of like surprised and shocked as to what's going on, even if it's not like a plot twist or anything crazy or big. I like to like figure things out as I go. I think a lot of the times whenever people read the back of the book, me included, it just gives away way too much, like I was kind of saying with the Prison Healer whenever I was explaining that, and I just like knowing literally nothing at all if I can. So that's what you're gonna get from me. After that, we have another graphic novel series. This one has been highly recommended in my comments by you guys. We have The Lore of Olympus by Rachel Smythe. I don't know how many books in this series there are, but I believe it is about like Greek mythology, but I don't exactly know what's going on. All I know is that it's pretty big, but the drawings are super unique and super beautiful. I'm really excited to get into this. I feel like it's going to be the same thing with Heartstopper, where it's just going to be super quick and fast paced, and I could probably read like one or two in like a day, but I really wanted to try another graphic novel series, so hopefully I'll be getting to this in December because it is on my December TBR. I just really want to read it in general. I just want to read more graphic novel series, so if you have any good recommendations for those too, leave those down below. Next up, we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This one kind of gives the same like gothic vibes I've heard as One Dark Window, like I talked about earlier. So I really want to read this. I've heard nothing but great things about the third one, Wisteria, in the trilogy that recently came out. Like a lot of people are rating it 5 stars and just absolutely loving it. And all I know about this one is that death is like a character, which sounds kind of interesting. Next up, we have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I feel like this gives major winter vibes, but it is on Kindle Unlimited. I believe they have a lot of classics on Kindle Unlimited actually, because the few classics that I have read have also been on there. And the first one was a no, an absolute no from me, but the second one was like okay that I read. So I'm hoping that my third go with classics, maybe this year, will be a good experience. And I've just heard so many great things about Little Women. So many people love it and say that it really like stands up to the test of time. And I finally want to watch the Timothée Chalamet Little Women because that, yes, please. I feel like I'm gonna eat that up. Then we have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This has been going very viral recently online. I feel like so many people have been rating this first book 5 stars. And then after that, there's more and more 5 stars. But this has been around for quite a bit. Actually, they just got different covers. It kind of gives me like ACOTAR vibes with like the bright, vibrant colors. All I know is that there's an empire and there's a rebellion going on and it's fantasy. So that sounds like a great story to me, honestly. And there's also 4 books. So it's not like a crazy long series or anything like that. And I feel like a lot of the people with very similar tastes to me really enjoy it. So I'm excited. Then we have Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is also another fantasy book. It is actually inspired by Chinese mythology, which I think is interesting. I've never read anything like that, and it's a duology. It's also the author's debut novel. And Miss Stephanie Garber herself has a little blurb on the front. She says, a breathtaking debut novel. So if Miss Stephanie Garber likes it, I feel like I'm gonna like it because I love Miss Stephanie Garber. And from the few people online that I've seen read this, I've heard they really enjoyed it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to get into more duologies and actually like finish them. So that's my goal with this one. There are also tons of new releases coming out this winter in the new year in 2025, but I'm going to be talking more about that in my 2025 TBR video that's going to be coming up really soon during Bookmas, a little sneaky peek for you. So if you want to know about the new releases that are on my winter TBR, go ahead and check that video out whenever it comes out soon. Let me know if you guys have any other thoughts on these books, any books you're really excited for me to read too, or if you want a reading vlog. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you watch until this far, go ahead and comment down below the snowflake emoji so I know who the real ones are who watched until the very end. Don't forget to check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, my Goodreads specifically if you want to keep up with what I'm reading in real time. They will always be linked down below in all of my videos. Also, go ahead and comment down below if you could recommend everybody one book to read this winter. What would your #1 recommendation be? I'm curious to see. Okay, I think that's really all from me today. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day, and I love you guys so much. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys. Happy holidays. Ew. Yes, I am wearing pajama pants with a dress. What about it? I feel like I'm doing good. Period. So much. What? Oh my gosh. Oh, what? For Pits. Pits? Okay. Okay. What is this feeling? Peace.